I want to talk about sexual harassment in the workplace. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to my channel and Killer Concepts, the place where we talk about all things true crime. My name is Peyton. Before we get started, please make sure to hit that red subscribe button down below and turn on your post notifications so you do not miss any future content. Today I want to talk about sexual harassment, and more specifically in the workplace. I sadly feel like we need to talk about this topic as I've been hearing too much about sexual harassment in the workplace lately. This includes things I have been told by people I know personally. It honestly makes me really mad that I should feel this should be discussed, but it has been weighing on me and I've been thinking about talking about it for a little while now, so it's just time. Specifically, we are going to talk about what exactly sexual harassment is, signs of sexual harassment, and some examples, as well as what can be done when this kind of thing is going on. Trust me when I tell you, I think you will be surprised by the definition. There is a lot of things that fall under sexual harassment that I didn't know did. I am sure there will be those who disagree with the definition, but it is what it is. Sexual harassment in the workplace is defined by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission as, quote, harassment can include sexual harassment or unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal and physical harassment of a sexual nature. Harassment does not have to be of a sexual nature, however, and can include offensive remarks about a person's sex. For example, it is illegal to harass a woman by making offensive comments about women in general. Although the law doesn't prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that are not very serious, harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in adverse employment decisions such as the victim being fired or demoted. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or someone who is not an employee or the employer, such as a client or customer, end quote. The one that I always forget falls under sexual harassment is basically sexist comments. So like, it says in the definition, quote, it is illegal to harass a woman by making offensive comments about women in general, end quote. If I had a nickel for every time I have heard comments like this made in a work environment, I would be a rich woman. So what are the laws regarding sexual harassment in the workplace? According to equalrights.org, quote, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 makes it illegal for employers to allow anyone to be sexually harassed at work by anyone else, regardless of sex, gender, or sexual orientation, end quote. This means that your employer can be held responsible if you are being harassed and you tell them and they fail to stop it. It does not necessarily hold the person who committed the acts accountable, but the employer. It is also illegal if retaliation happens. For example, if an employer punishes you or fires you for reporting sexual harassment, that is illegal. Being left out of meetings and communications you were formally part of can also be considered retaliation. Your employer can also not ignore you if you report sexual harassment. By law, they're to take immediate action to try and stop the behavior. If nothing gets better with the situation, you can then possibly take legal action. I know what it is like to deal with comments and lewd remarks. I thankfully have never had to deal with advances on me or anything like that. But for those of you who have, definitely take action. I know it can be hard to go up to an employer and tell them what is going on, but please try. The more people speak up, the better it will get, because people will realize that they cannot do this kind of thing, that there is consequences for their action. Unfortunately, there are a lot of situations where the harassment is coming from the top or the owner. I had an employer who had me try on a V-neck t-shirt to see what size they needed for their lady friends outside of the workplace. They were going to give them to somebody. The women who ordered the shirts within the office actually bought me a size up on purpose because the situation even made them feel uncomfortable. So I didn't even ask them to do that. That's something that they saw and that they did on their own. So clearly it was something that people thought shouldn't have been said or thought was odd. To me personally, I just try and ignore that kind of thing. I know you probably shouldn't, but just remember you don't have to. You can say no. You can say stop doing that. Someone does not have the right to make you feel uncomfortable, especially in the place where you just want to get your work done and go home. I also had a man high up in a company see me outside of work once and then at work bring up to me what I was wearing, my workout outfit. And to me, it was uncomfortable, to say the least. I didn't really know how to take this. It was only a one-time thing, so for me, I wouldn't consider that harassment. But it is uncomfortable. So I just want to give that as an example that it's just inappropriate. I swear some people just don't have any social cues, and that's part of the problem. But it's really simple. If you don't say or do anything to make someone uncomfortable, there isn't going to be a problem in the first place. So what about the statistics? Harassment in the workplace is actually much more common than people realize. The National Sexual Violence Resource Center published the following statistics. Keep in mind, a lot of them are from 2018, 2019. This is the same for most of the sources for some reason. I'm not really sure why. Maybe they just haven't done any new studies on it. So 38% of all women and 14% of men have reported being sexually harassed at work. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 17 men have sought a new job assignment, changed jobs, or quit a job because of sexual harassment and assault. 60% of women say they have experienced unwanted sexual attention, sexual coercion, sexually crude contact, or sexist comments in the workplace. Over 85% of people who experience sexual harassment never file a legal charge, and approximately 70% of employees never even complain internally. Per Criterion, between fiscal year 2018 to 2021, the EEOC received a total of 27,291 sexual harassment complaints. Of all the charges filed, 78.2% were filed by women. So yeah, the statistics are kind of staggering. You know, there's a lot out there if you want to look it up, or you can look more into my sources below. But I think we need to talk about those numbers so people realize that it's a lot more common than you think. So now let's get into some examples of behaviors that qualify as sexual harassment. These are listed on equalrights.org, which you can find in the description box below under my sources. So making unwanted requests for sexual favors or dates, making inappropriate comments about someone's body or appearance, saying bad things or making fun of someone of a specific gender or orientation, gender-based or sexual orientation-based slurs, making vulgar, offensive, or explicit jokes about sex or sexual acts. I want to pause on this one for a minute. I feel like this is probably one of the most common or prevalent behaviors when it comes to this. Water cooler talks seem to get people in trouble, and this kind of thing is why. Be careful when making jokes like this or comments, even though the person around you or who you are talking to may be laughing at that moment, doesn't necessarily mean that they think it's funny and that they think it's okay. A lot of people laugh when they are uncomfortable or laugh along when they're not really sure how to respond to a situation or don't know what to say in response. So just don't say stupid things that could possibly get you in trouble especially if you are just saying them because you think they're funny. It just really isn't worth it. It isn't worth the possible legal ramifications that it can bring upon you. So just avoid it altogether. So now back to the examples. Sending or sharing emails, texts, or messages in a sexual nature, gossiping about someone's personal life or sex life, unwanted touching, staring, leering, or making lewd gestures, displaying, sending, or sharing vulgar pictures or pornography. So all of those are examples of behaviors that are considered sexual harassment. So now that we have pretty much covered those behaviors, let's do a scenario. So let's say a girl works in an office environment. This girl is uncomfortable because her manager is always commenting on how she looks, saying things like, quote, "You look nice in that dress," end quote. While it may sound fine, actually kind of nice, it could still be considered sexual harassment. The biggest thing here that makes it harassment is whether or not the recipient, or the girl in this case, is okay with the comments being made. As soon as that behavior is unwanted or seems inappropriate, making this girl uncomfortable, it crosses the line into sexual harassment. I know that may not make sense, but that's just how the law kind of has it written per what we discussed previously. So I also want to do an example with a male because this can happen with either sex. So let's say a guy works in a factory. He's surrounded by all different kinds of people, female, male, gay, straight. This guy's attractive and he works out. People can see this. Women at work start coming up to him and grabbing his arms to feel his muscles, and they're touching his butt. You know, and even some guys are making comments at him about how he looks and how his butt is huge and, you know, his shirt's too tight. If this is unwanted, then it is sexual harassment. Just don't do it. I personally know someone who this has happened to, and it is so uncalled for. Most of the time, people don't want you touching them or making remarks all of the time about them or their person, especially if you do it so much that someone starts dressing differently. Just because the harassment is coming from a woman does not mean it's okay. And just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you can go up and grab a man. And that's the thing that people need to realize. This goes both ways, you know. A woman can sexually harass a man just as much as a man can sexually harass a woman. Or people of the same sex. It's an overall problem, and it needs to be dealt with, because I think a lot of employers don't take it seriously enough. And this stuff in general just makes me really mad, honestly, because pretty much all of this should be considered common sense. It really isn't that hard. If you are being subjected to sexual harassment in your workplace, what can you do about it? So first and foremost, equalrights.org says that if you are comfortable doing so, ask that person that's doing the harassing to stop. This can be done verbally, but I would recommend personally doing it in a written form. If you do it in written form and the harassment continues to happen, you will have proof that you asked them to stop. You can also look at your company's policies regarding harassment. Some have a certain procedure that they may want you to follow on how to report the problem. Most importantly to me, write everything down. This is something that my mom taught me from a young age. I call it making a CYA list. This stands for covering your own. Write down what is happening, what was said or done, dates and times. If there was witnesses, then you write that down. You write everything down. Keep a record of absolutely everything. This can not only help you if you need to reach out to your HR department, but in a legal battle as well. I honestly recommend this for any problem you have at work. especially with another employee, even if it isn't harassment. Keep copies of any complaints you file with the company and their responses, as well as any other documents. Report any harassment to your HR department or your boss. That is, if they aren't the person doing the harassing. Again, I recommend doing this in writing. If there are enough people dealing with the issue and it's not just you, then you can all band together and report it that way as well. If you are a union member, you can report it to the union. You can also report to a government agency such as the EEOC or Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, but you must make sure that you are within the deadlines. So make sure to read up on that because you have to report it within a certain deadline. Lastly, you can always talk to a lawyer. Honestly, this is the route that you probably want to hold off on the most, as it can get messy. But if it is bad enough and the employer is doing nothing or fires you, you may have to go that way. There is no excuse for an employer to tolerate sexual harassment, but unfortunately, it is ignored a lot of the time. One thing I hate hearing is that someone pretty much brought it on themselves by the way that they dressed. Stop making excuses like that. Dressing a certain way, yeah, maybe they shouldn't do it, but it does not mean someone is free game to bother. It does not mean that you can just go up and do what you want. It does not mean they brought it on themselves. You as a person should have enough sense to just leave them alone. They're not asking for it because they're doing something or saying something a certain way and you're taking it the wrong way. So with that being said, that is all I have for you today. I know this was a shorter video and maybe even a little boring to some, but I think it is important to talk about, and that is what matters. We are talking about what needs to be talked about, not always what is the most entertaining. That's what I try and do here on this channel. And if you've been watching me over the past year, then I've really transitioned into talking about smaller crimes a lot of the time, talking about domestic violence, human trafficking, the smaller things, but the problems that really matter, not as much the big cases all the time. Please make sure that you are subscribed to my channel so that you do not miss any future content. Any case suggestions can be sent to killerconceptsvlog@gmail.com, or you can comment them down below. We'll probably be back to a normal case next week, but I will keep you updated. All sources for today's video are down below in the description box, as well as all of my social media handles, so make sure to go follow me on there. And before you go, just remember that the world's most dangerous minds hide in the most unlikely places. Stay safe.